This is another one of those "What is your practice?" videos, probably number 7 I think, since I started making these in response to something that somebody asked on some video somewhere. I didn't realise how many nutty fucking habits I've got, but anyway, yeah, number 7. This is focusing. Focusing is a practice that I do probably 3 or 4 times a day. It's very simple, and it comes out of Eugene Gendlin. He originated it. Who's a kind of therapist, counsellor, phenomenologist chap, and he developed this really working with Carl Rogers, who developed Rogerian client-centered therapy sometime in the 1950s or 60s, I guess, something like that. And Eugene Gendlin, working with Carl Rogers, noticed that there was a distinct pattern amongst the clients that Rogers was working with, which correlated with the success rate. You know, some people would undergo Rogerian therapy. It's very simple. You know, it's a kind of talking therapy, but it's always led by the client. That's how it works. And sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't. And what Gendlin noticed was, or what he claims to have noticed, is that those people who it worked on best seemed to carry out a little bit of behaviour which is very distinctive. They seemed to like stop what they were doing and kind of listen, and then come out again. And what he said they were doing, and what was kind of demonstrated later on with some experiments around it, is that these people were not consciously, or not, yeah, kind of semi-consciously, what these people were doing were monitoring their internal state. They were very good at you know, kind of listening to what was happening inside their body. You know, their pulse rate, their heart, their breathing, and the more complex kind of biochemical stuff. They could quite readily take a reading of what was happening inside themselves. They probably wouldn't talk about it in those terms, but that's what they were doing. They would you know, listen to the signals that their body was sending them. And you know, as I say, the people who could do that seem to have a much better chance of improvement using Rogerian therapy. And taking that, Eugene Gendlin developed this practice which he called focusing, which was, you know, just basically formalizing that technique, getting people to do it consciously. And I don't follow exactly his strategy, but the way that he describes it is you kind of ask a question, ask your body a question, like, how do I feel about this situation, whatever it is, and then you send your consciousness kind of back and down into your body and try and get a sense of what's happening down there. There's a number of stages involved in it in a more complex form, clearing a space and these other bits of things you have to do down there. But the idea is that you go in and down and try and get some kind of sense of what this amorphous feeling is that you're getting. And it's usually a bit fuzzy. And then after you've done various bits of things down there, it gets a bit clearer, and it starts to turn from bodily sensation into a kind of articulate responses, which is fascinating. Now I don't do all of that. That's my practice isn't all of that really, but I do like this idea of going back and down and conceiving the workings of the body. You know, the kind of intelligence that the body has to situations, because the body's responding to the environment all the time, and the body's responding to the emotional situations that you're in the whole time, even though you're not aware of it. I quite like the idea of tapping into that a little bit, and the idea of conceiving it as being somehow behind you, or back, behind your eyes, but also down, and the experienced world, the visualized world, as being kind of up and out in front of you. It's just the way I think of it. Personally, I try and tie that bit of practice, that visualization of you know, the information from the body lying back and down, I try and tie that into some stuff that Douglas Harding talks about in terms of where your subjectivity is. I think I'd probably take another video to talk about that, but he talks about your kind of core self, if you like, as being kind of infinitely small, or perhaps a void. You know, when you get closer and closer to it, and eventually it kind of vanishes. But you need to go through that process of going closer and closer to it, to this point where that going closer is the thing itself, really, rather than the thing you find there. It's the journey towards it. So there's a bit of that for me mixed into this. And the purposes of it, you know, the purpose of doing this going back and down thing isn't so that, for me at least, it isn't to introspect. It isn't so I can, God, it's so hard to phrase this actually. It isn't really to do what Gendlin says about, you know, taking a reading of your internal milieu. For me, it's about creating a space down there to go into, to give me a bit of depth. You know what I mean? To give me a bit of a place further back than stuck out here and where the mask of your face is. You know, to give yourself a bit of ground back behind that to exist in. So that's kind of what I'm doing with that. Not sure if that makes any cogent sense at all, but it's focusing. Kind of bastardized version of focusing. That's one of my practices.